Yo, Kpaceguy here. This is going to be the second episode of 7 Reasons Why. This episode is going to be 7 reasons why you shouldn't upgrade to Dolby Atmos or DTS just yet. Let's get into it. Reason number 7 is going to be space. Space is a big factor when you're thinking about a Dolby Atmos or DTS setup, even RAW 3D. It's a big investment. And when I say space, I don't mean necessarily like if you can fit your speakers into your room, but more so, do you have the spacing you need to actually hear the difference between your front and your rear Dolby Atmos channels? So in this room, my room is pretty small, but from front to back is very long, and so I have a really good, my ear can detect better what's coming from the front and what's coming from the back. Now, not only is the difference between the height channels important, but the difference between your surround back channels and then your height channels is also a factor. If you don't have enough space between your bottom level surround sound and your top level surround sound, it's going to be hard for you to deter which one's coming from where. And although not being able to locate your surround sound is ideal, it's more of object-based surround sound when you get to that second level. You want to actually be able to hear that something's coming from over your head flying across this direction, because that's what Atmos is for, is to give you that 3D level that you don't necessarily get with your first level of sound. Same thing with the front. If you can't put your ceiling speakers high enough, opposed to where your floor standers are, then you're not really going to hear the difference. You're gonna hear Atmos, but it's gonna sound like it's coming from a straight plane, kind of like where your floor standings are, and you lose that Atmos effect whenever it's not high enough above your head. So we're gonna choose spacing as number 7. Reason number 6 is going to have to be cable management. Now, let's say that you have an Atmos system now, or you're looking at one, and you have not the height channels like in the ceiling, or not the modules you put on your speakers, but kind of like mine, you have the ones where they're just sitting on the wall, firing down towards the listening position. That's cool, but if you look on YouTube now, some people who don't really have the money to do like installs or something like that have cables running straight up from the back of the receiver, and they're going up the wall and over to the speaker. And for most people, most wives, that's not acceptable. It's almost tacky looking. You can almost say amateur. But it's not really either of those. It's more of, I don't have the means of putting my cable underneath this or behind the wall or something like that. You don't really have that luxury. So I think cable management is going to be reason number 6, just because of how hard it is to get your cables underneath the wall or behind a picture frame, or maybe you're fortunate enough and you have curtains or something like that, you can kind of drape it behind. But a lot of people don't have that, and it does cause for extra speaker wire or special speaker wire if you're going to put it behind the wall, or if you're going to run long wire to go through the corners of your wall and over. It can get kind of tough. So cable management is going to be number 6. Number 5 is going to be movie content. Now, if you're still in that area where people have physical Blu-ray players, like you know how the Oppo is saying goodbye to the community. If you still have a physical Blu-ray player or 4K Ultra HD player, then you're getting your DTS and your Atmos through the DVDs that provide that sound format for you. But if you don't have that, you're probably streaming your services, right? Netflix, Vudu, Amazon Prime Video, things like that. And right now, there's not a lot of content right now that has DTS encoded in it, or Dolby Atmos, and especially not RAW 3D. So if you're not using a physical DVD player, then you're most likely not watching content that's in Atmos or DTS. Like I said, there are some services that provide it. Netflix is starting to put things on there that use Dolby Atmos, but I haven't seen anything DTS. but most things that you're streaming are still running in 5.1. And if you're lucky, you might get 7.1. But right now, you're not even getting your Dolby Atmos and DTS unless you like the content that currently shows that. And it also costs you a little bit extra if you're going to go and run that service. So not only do you need your Dolby Atmos setup, you need to pay a little bit extra. So Netflix base, I think it's like $7.99. I'm not even sure how much it costs anymore. But to get 4K Ultra HD picture and things like that, you have to upgrade from the standard Netflix to that to get that provided service. So you have to put a little extra money in just to stream in your 4K Ultra HD and your DTS and Dolby Atmos. I do believe, I haven't seen anything that gives you oral DD. Not many people are using that, and it asks for more speakers than Atmos does, although it's probably more practical to run oral DD because you're able to put speakers in more of a place that most people can actually afford to do, opposed to Atmos, which wants you to put them in the ceiling and stuff like that. But nonetheless, you're not watching anything that has Atmos or DTS anyway unless you're using a physical DVD player, as I have. So that's going to have to be reason number 5. Reason number 4 is going to have to be configuration. The full 7.2.4, 5.2.4, 9.2.4. You want to run as many Atmos speakers as you can because you want the full immersion. Some people are running 5.2.2, 7.2.2, or something of that sort. And it sounds good, but it doesn't sound the best. It's not the best you can get. And if you're going to run Atmos, it's better to run it at its full capability so that you get the full experience that your money went towards. So right now, some people are running the 5.2.2, and either they're having just the front height channels firing down towards them, and that's fine. Some people have them on the sides, and they're firing from the side of them, but you're not really getting that full effect. And if you're going to go Atmos or DTS, it will serve you well just to go ahead and get that extra 2 channels. Some people don't have the receiver to get those extra 2 channels, which we'll talk about soon. But that's something that I think you should invest in. Go ahead and get those extra 2 channels and run a full Atmos or full DTS. I think the most right now you can get is 6 speakers, but I think that's overkill. I think 2 in the front above you and 2 in the back above you will serve a very good purpose. It gives you that dome shape that you like. Most things are encoded with that configuration in mind. So it's best just to go ahead and get that full 4 channels. So that's going to have to be reason number 4. Reason number 3 is going to be ceiling type. And when I say ceiling type, not like sealed, not necessarily like enclosed, but like roof, ceiling, okay? Some people have those pointy ceilings that go up at a point, vaulted ceilings that are way too high. And some people have the ideal ceilings, which I believe is as low as 8 feet if you're using the modules that go on top of your speaker, which I highly do not advise that route of Atmos. But most people have pretty high ceilings, and if not, they're at a vaulted peak. And that's not ideal for Atmos. If you're looking at Atmos, but you have those kinds of ceilings, it's going to be really hard for you to run Atmos unless you're going to mount them on the wall and have them firing down from the wall to your listening position. That's probably your best option. Trying to get a beam that goes like this and then mounting it under here, firing at you, is pretty tough to come. It's pretty tough to pull that off. And then those who don't have like structures that go like this, here's your roof that comes to a point, and then you have that beam that you want. Those who don't even have that to use are going to end up having to put their speakers like here on the side, and then try to figure out how to angle them towards you. And that's just, it's going to cause a lot of issues trying to figure out how to cut a hole in the roof and get that speaker pointed. Now, if you guys don't know how ceiling speakers work, they do actually have like, they have the driver, and then the tweeter is actually pointed out towards the listening position, so that could work. It's still not the best Atmos that you can get. So I think ceiling type comes into a giant factor if you're looking into Atmos. So if you have vaulted ceilings like that, or your ceilings are really, really high, Atmos may not be the encoding for you, and it's not fair. And they've tried to compensate with it by adding modules that you can put onto your speakers and then they bounce off, but that's still a problem because once you hit that angle, your speaker is going to bounce in whatever direction that it wants to go. And not only is it bouncing wherever it wants to go, that distance from your speaker up to the ceiling and back to you, you're it's diffusing a lot of sound. You're really going to have to crank up those modules just so that it reaches your ear at the same level and at the same time as your floor standing speakers that you have currently in your setup. So vaulted ceilings and high ceilings, not good for Atmos. So we're going to have to make that reason number 3. We're going to make receiver configuration reason number 2. What I mean by receiver configuration is, I kind of briefly mentioned in a previous reason, if you have a receiver that's not capable of amplifying all of your channels, and you don't want to get a separate exponent, like maybe like a preamp or something like that, then you're lacking in channels as far as Dolby Atmos goes. So some receivers are really budget friendly, have pretty good amount of bells and whistles. You're not looking into too much. You just want a good receiver. So you get a 5.2.2 receiver. Cool and all, but you're losing those last 2 channels like I mentioned previously in another reason. And when you don't have the channels, you're not getting the full effect. If you want to go Atmos, get the full experience, because without the 4 speakers or more, you're kind of missing out on a lot. So receiver configuration is a big part in your Atmos. Most receivers don't come with the adequate amount of amplification power to be able to power 4 different Atmos speakers, but they come with pre-outs so that you can run a separate amp and then power the Atmos with that amp. But most people don't want to get another amp, which surprises me, because having an external amplifier really helps not only your sound quality, but your configuration. It allows you to have more options, allows you to get a little bit of the load off of your receiver so that it lasts longer. But if you don't have a receiver that's running at least a 9.2.2 or something like that, and then having an extra external amp to run the last 2 channels, you're missing out. You really should look into an external amp. If you have a receiver that can only power 2 and you have pre-outs to power 4, you can power 2 sets of heights. You should look into that. You definitely look into that. But most people have receivers that are 7.1.2 or 7.2.2 or 5.2.2, maybe 9.2.2 might be the biggest. You can go 11.2.2. You still can't really power everything you want to just a receiver alone. Although Denon has came out with a 13.2 channel receiver that allows you to power all your floor standing speakers and then have your height right from the receiver without having any external devices, which cost you an arm and a leg. So it's still impractical. I'm sure the price will drop and more companies will start doing what Denon did. But right now, it's really hard to come across a receiver that can power all your channels. So definitely look into something that can help you get those last 2 channels. Last but not least is reason number 1. Reason number 1 is speaker configuration. It's kind of similar to what I said in some of the other reasons, but what I mean by speaker configuration is to be able to have all 4 speakers power at the same time. You may have the space, you may have the amplification. Let's say you have that external amplifier that's powering up some other speakers to free up some space on your receiver set. You can power those 4 Atmos speakers. That's what you want. That's what you want. But if you don't have the proper setup, then it's not going to work. Also, what I mean by speaker configuration is the type of speakers that you're going to be using to run your Dolby Atmos. Right now, in my current room, I have just 4 satellite speakers that are on the wall, pointed towards listening position. And it's adequate, but it's not ideal. And why is it not ideal? The type of satellite speaker that I have doesn't really give me a lot of output. It came from an old home theater in a box from Harman Kardon. And so you can hear them, but barely. They don't match the sound of the rest of the speakers in the room, and they don't give me the same power. I really have to crank those up to get the same volume level as everything else in here. So they're not very efficient. So running the right speaker is also huge in having a good Dolby Atmos sound. Another reason why I mentioned speaker configuration is what kind of Atmos are you running? Are you running your in-ceiling Atmos? Are you running your on-the-wall Atmos? Or are you using the speaker modules that are either built into the speaker or rest on top of the speaker? Which ones are you using? And that will determine probably how good your Atmos experience is. I see a lot of people now who have the clip speakers that have the module mounted, or the module built into the top of the speaker. Same thing with definitive technology. They have their speaker module that you can just kind of snap into place, and then it fires from the ceiling and bounces back. That is the worst kind of Atmos that you can have. That's the worst kind of Atmos. Not that it's bad, but it's the worst out of all of the options that you have. You just don't get the same sound. Like I said in a previous reason, by the time that speaker has amplified its sound from the ceiling back to you, you've lost a lot of sound, like decibel wise. You've lost a lot of volume level. You've also have to compensate for latency. And I'm not sure how Odyssey and MCACC and things like that compensate for that kind of things, because whenever you're running your software to configure to run your microphone to calibrate your system, I'm not sure that the microphone can tell whenever you're running Atmos from. I mean, I know there's like a setting where you can pick if your Atmos is on the ceiling, on the wall, like where your Atmos is at, but it's really hard for the microphone to be able to compensate for Atmos when it's coming from your ceiling to your wall. I mean, from your ceiling to you, and then the other one's coming from this side of the ceiling to you, and the ceilings look like this, so it's bouncing at different angles. It's really hard and it's really tough to achieve a good Atmos sound whenever you're dealing with latency and you're dealing with low volume level. It's really cranking that speaker up, trying to make sure that it comes to your ear at the same level at the same time. The next best option for those who don't have good ceilings is the wall mounted option, which is your Klipsch speakers. I think they're 140, I think it's their number, RF 140 or 142s, I'm not sure. And then your SVS Prime elevation speakers. Those are the ones that sit flat on your wall, but they're built so that they're angled automatically, and they point down at your listening position. So you can put them as high as you want to on your wall with mounting brackets, and then they'll point directly at you. And you just place them above your floor standing speakers or your bookshelf speakers, whatever you have, and they're already angled down at you. So all you gotta do is mount it, and you're good. That's the route that I'm going here in my home theater, and that's what I think for those who don't have like the best ceilings or something like that. But when you run those kinds of speakers, you're going to deal with the fact that you have to figure out how to hide the wires, which was one of my reasons, was cable management. You got to figure out how to run that wire from your receiver or your external amplifier all the way across your wall, up your wall to that speaker. You know, and it's difficult. It's going to cost you a little bit to find that much wire. If you have the means of putting it in through the wall, that's the best thing. That's also going to cost you extra money, and it limits you to being able to move your sound system to a different room, something like that. If you ever decide you want to decorate a little bit, you're probably not going to be able to move that speaker because you've already drilled that hole and you've wired the wire through the wall up to that speaker. It's going to be hard to do any decorating or moving around. And of course, the most ideal Atmos is the in-ceiling speaker. If you have the ideal roof, the ideal ceiling, then that's the way to go. If you can afford to get that installed for you, have it pointed to your listening position, that's the best Atmos, but it's the most impractical one. So those are the different configurations that are needed if you're going to have a good Atmos, and I've tried to tell you guys the best way I can why you should choose one over the other or why you shouldn't choose one over the other. But Atmos is a really cool thing. DTS-X also, I keep forgetting to mention DTS-X, but Atmos is the name that most people hear. But it's a really cool experience. I don't think I could ever listen to movies without it anymore. Most receivers, if the DVD, Blu-ray doesn't have Atmos DTS-X encoded into it, it'll probably convert it to DTS-X Atmos, so it kind of gives you what it should sound like. But if you haven't heard Atmos, take a listen to it. It sounds amazing. I just want you to listen to it the way that it was intended, and you're paying good money for this kind of stuff, so it's best to find a receiver and external amplifier and speakers and speaker wire and a room that really gives you the best sound possible, because this is an investment, and most people who put those things into their house, they're really into music and movies, so it's best to get the best experience, and people will love it too. So that's gonna do it, guys. That was 7 reasons why not to go to Dolby Atmos and DTS-X just yet. Not because it's not good, but you gotta do it right. So that's gonna be it for this. Stay tuned for more. If you haven't subscribed, be a subscriber, because fun things are happening on this channel. I'm doing a giveaway for Nintendo Switch. If you haven't seen that video, excuse me, go back a couple of videos. I believe it's in there. I'll put it at the end of this video, so you just click on it right there. Subscribe, like, and comment on that video, and you are automatically entered to win a Nintendo Switch. Now, be warned. Today is Thursday at the time of this video being posted. That Nintendo Switch giveaway ends Monday, April 30th. I will be announcing the winner on April 30th at some point in time during the day, so you have to stay tuned. So make sure you push that bell when you subscribe, so that next time a video comes from my channel, you're the first person to get notified. So Kpaceguy out. Thanks, guys.